need to say yes, I think, I'm not sure. And I will move forward. So I'm Martin Charter, so my background is originally in business and then in academia for the last 20 odd years. And I've really been focusing around product sustainability, sustainable innovation, but generally from a business context rather than so much from the design side, but learned a lot about that over the years. And we've also been working around, policy issues as well. And working around circular economy when it was termed resource efficiency and resource productivity. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to get into the meat of the presentation here. And what we have also here today is 4 panelists that will join a discussion later on. So we've got Walter Starr-Hill, Product Life Institute, got Danielle Fatibien. You'll have to excuse my pronunciation, Danielle, from IAI. We've got David McGinty from PACE and Christian Topp from the Duchy of Luxembourg. So I'll introduce the panelists a little bit later on. So I'll get now into the meat of the presentation. So as part of the recent activities, we also produced a book called Designing for the Circular Economy that really covers a number of the issues which also Walter and Amici contributed towards. And also recently did some work for DG RTD, reviewing past Horizon and Framework projects in the context of classifying, evaluating them in terms of circular economy. So we're seeing, various DGs getting more interested in circular economy within the European Commission. And as many as have recognised in the area, we've seen an increased usage of the term circular economy, and this is extracted from Google Trends, which shows the usage and searches around circular economy. And we've seen since 2012 and 2013 quite a significant growth in the searches around the term. And what we're seeing increasingly is a number of organizations at different levels starting to recognize the linkages between different SDGs and circular economy. However, we are seeing some countries and organizations that really seem to be trying to cut a course where they're suggesting circular economy is an entirely new thing, and long live circular economy, goodbye sustainable development. I personally don't think that's the right direction. From a personal point of view, I see circular economy as part of that wider sustainable development brief, building on a lot of the original work and thinking and activities around resource efficiency, resource productivity, etc. And for many of us, of course, we're very familiar with the Elaine MacArthur Foundation butterfly model. Looking at the bio and the technical systems, and this is a core element of the more material-focused aspect of circular economy thinking. So, in my personal view, we're seeing really circular economy to me is much more about retaining value in economic and social systems for as long as possible. And it's less of a discussion around waste. However, if we look at things on a global context, still many countries are grappling with even basic waste management. So we've still got to recognize that there are challenges and different leadership within different places in the world. We've still got challenges around definition of terms, and something, I think there's a paper written a couple of years ago that came up with something like 20 different definitions. We've still got lack of clarity over definitions even in terms like remanufacturing. You know, I revisited the area a couple of years ago, and I was surprised to see there was still no sort of globally agreed standard around remanufacturing. So even at the sub level, we have, you know, some challenges with the terminology. However, what we've seen emerge over the last couple of years is that now ISO have picked up, International Standards Organization has picked the baton up, and they've now set up a technical committee, TC323, focused on circular economy. And that technical committee now is kicking off 4 standards under the heading. And these are starting to be developed and are now being drafted in the very early stages around 4 areas. So the key, I'll mention 3. So the first one is on concept, terms and definitions. The second one is on new business models and value chains. And the third one is on metrics and measurement. However, the challenge with these standards is that one can't really define the business models, and particularly the metrics and measurement, until we've got clarity on the concept and the terms and definitions. So there's quite a complex matrix management that is attempting to go on to make sure these things align. So there is a lot of interest in this, as we're seeing in a number of the global activities. So there was something like 220 plus experts that joined the first meeting, and we're seeing, you know, significant numbers of people joining the online meetings of the World Circular Economy Forum, and a lot of the satellite events going on. So there seems to be growing interest in people engaging in the area. So what we see is that the G20, you know, is responsible for 2/3 of global material use. So it's very important here in terms of particularly material use, and that we're expected to see, you know, if current trends continue without appropriate interventions, an increase from 6.5 billion tons, you know, in terms of material use, to 142 billion tons by 2050. And really, we've seen significant growth, you know, in materials use across the world. But of course, there are links between materials use and climate change. And resource efficiency approaches, it has been highlighted in various reports, could increase resource efficiency, could reduce, you know, greenhouse emissions by a significant number. You know, in a sense, by retaining that value in the systems and not creating new products, components and materials in that sense, or mining, and, you know, we can reduce, you know, per capita, you know, CO2 and broader greenhouse gas emissions. So transitioning towards a circular economy has enormous potential to reduce CO2 emissions. And you know, there are, you know, particular links here to a number of strategies to work on CO2 reduction. And we're even seeing new terms emerge that I've tried to dig into a little bit, are emerging from the agenda, linked to particularly carbon capture, utilization and storage. So I've seen particularly seemingly to be emerging out of Saudi Arabia with other stakeholders, this new term, carbon circular economy, that seems to be aligned to the link to carbon. And you know, some thought leaders seem to be getting involved with this, like Bill McDonough, and there seems to be various workshops that have been held, you know, over the last 6 months. I'm personally yet to get my head around entirely where the circular bit comes in, but it's another term that is emerging from another, let's say, from the climate change carbon community. So, you know, the impacts of, there's been, various impacts of COVID around the circular economy discussions, which include, potentially the reshoring of manufacturing from China to various parts of the world. And obviously, if we start to reshore manufacturing, that has the potential for more localized or regionalized consumption and production, that they then may provide the parameters for potentially increased, repair systems or remanufacturing systems. The other sort of perverse impact is that just as the world is starting to sort of move forward on policy, processes around single-use plastics and marine plastic, reducing marine plastic pollutions, we're seeing a massive increase in the use of single-use plastics and disposables. So for example, one of the examples we gave in a paper, I think, was Starbucks, at least at some stage, banned the use of ceramic mugs and required people to use single-use items for their coffee. And obviously, we've got all the issues with masks and masks washing up on shorelines in the sea, etc. So, whilst that marine plastic, single-use plastics issue is permeating a lot of activities, we've got this sort of short-term, problem that's working against some of this. We've also seen, perhaps some of the budgets that were going to be allocated to circular economy activities being shifted to public health. So already, CV19 is, impacting this, but also on the, in a sense, in the positive side of this, in a number of the green recovery plans that are coming up around the world. Low carbon, circular, and inclusive are key words in some of those activities. And that's perhaps slightly different from 208, is circular and inclusive are being added to some of that green growth, green economy discussion. So in terms of state of the circular economy and global activities in Europe, we've had the Circular Economy Action Plan 2.0 earlier in the year. We have Italy now establishing a national framework to increase circularity in the Italian economy. And then one of, I think, the 4 main priorities for Italy's G20 presidency is circular economy. Finland have kicked off, certainly being led by CITRA, the World Circular Economy Forum, with what now seems to be almost an online workshop a week happening. It's a massive proliferation of satellite activities going on. And it's, tough to keep track with it all. Netherlands has stated they want to become 100% circular by 2050, and it's, everything seems to be circular in the Netherlands at the moment. I'd be interested to see the amount of, for example, research money that's being allocated to circular activities, in the Netherlands. France, they have a roadmap for circular economy, and Sweden and Austria, for example, looking at new policy instruments to incentivize circularity, for example, tax reductions to incentivize repair. I'm yet to sort of fully understand whether those are still proposals or whether something has been implemented, but certainly there were some indication that they were going to be implementing incentives there. Germany is continuing to push down the resource efficiency program, building on, historically strong, a strong base. And within Asia, Japan continues to be a front runner, building on a lot, again, similarly, their activity around resource efficiency and productivity, and some of their strategic initiatives linked to material sound economy. China, and what we've picked up is some from various circles, there seems to be a sort of misunderstanding. Some people are putting China ahead of Japan saying China's the leader in this, but from our experience, Japan have clearly got the embedded knowledge and systems and structures. China, yes, they had the first circular economy promotion law in 2008, but it's slightly less clear exactly what's happening. Yes, they have a remanufacturing zone in the east of China, but the extent to which they're, incentivizing repair or refurbishment or new renewable material development in the biosystem is less clear. So India haven't chosen to use the words resource efficiency, but they are progressing, circular economy, but they're progressing resource efficiency activities. And other countries are undertaking different initiatives. Some are, using more directly the term circular economy, others less so. And what we've also seen is a number of countries experimenting with different policy instruments to try and influence the demand and supply side in terms of, more circular approaches. So I won't, for time, go into detail here. Similarly, again, I won't go into great detail here, but in the Circular Economy Action Plan 1.0 in November, December 2015, the European Commission pulled together a wide variety of policy initiatives. And what was sort of particularly interesting there is that they focused on the 5 priority areas, more of that material focus: plastics, food waste, critical raw materials, construction, biomass, etc. And sort of interestingly, last year they published a report on their activities, and a number and quite significant progress was made in certain areas. So the European Commission seems to be wanting to take leadership on a global basis here, and I'll come back to that in a short while. So again, Ursula von der Leyen, recalibrated Europe's ambitions around sustainable development, climate change, and within that, circular economy in the European Green Deal. And the Commission seems to be quite serious on this overarching framework. And within that, the 8 or so priority areas: circular economy, linked to industrial strategy, and seemingly from the Commission being seen as linked to competitiveness, they put together the Circular Economy Action Plan 2.0. Within this, for some of us watchers of these policy measures of the Commission, suddenly plopping out of the Circular Economy Action Plan was this fairly big thing, the Sustainable Product Policy Initiative or Framework. And this really starts to at least highlight more seriously the Commission's ambition to not just look at product policy, from the point of view of energy-related products, but now starting to bring in non-energy-related products. So in the past, the Commission had developed the Integrated Product Policy Initiative, looking at smart ways to use demand and supply side policy tools to green markets. But they seem to be pushing forward the Sustainable Product Policy Initiative, again, to drive products, energy using and not, but also particularly looking at circularity aspects, and they've highlighted particular value chains within this. And particularly what is interesting is that they've now bringing in clothing, textiles, fashion as a new sector into the discussion. There's a range of initiatives that they're going to implement or continue to work on, including new regulatory frameworks for batteries, revision of waste shipment regulations, right through to a strategy on textiles and a circular electronics initiative. And this circular electronics initiative, it's sort of interesting. They're further focusing on electronics, even though they've done quite a lot, the Commission. But they've decided to bring in new initiatives, particularly starting to look at the area of built-in product obsolescence, the right to repair, so bringing in, activities with citizens, even discussing, consumer affairs and things like this. So a range of initiatives there, and again within the Circular Economy Action Plan as one of the sort of leading initiatives global level. What they're highlighting as cross-cutting issues is this link between circular economy and climate neutrality, getting the economics right, and then the link to research, innovation, and digitalization. And what they state in the action plan is this a range of initiatives to try and bring out European expertise on a global level. I'd say I've just drilled in a little bit there in Europe as an example, but there are many examples, particularly from Japan, of leading edge thinking. And it's sort of quite interestingly, Japan was quite late to engage in using the term circular economy. It's only really, I think a key issue is there's Japan, I think it was in 2018, hosted the World Circular Economy Forum. So that was perhaps them stepping up to the plate to then bring their expertise and knowledge into the discussion. And also, and Ichin will maybe comment on this later, is it was also interestingly a key year in the Japanese movement towards a materially sound society and economy. So it's the date was set quite a long time ago. So some key cross-cutting issues that are relevant for thinking going forward within G20 and whatever. Design is important in this whole area. 80% of products' environmental impact is determined at the design stage. If you're not bringing in repairability, dismantleability, etc., with the right incentives for manufacturers, and also maybe other policy approaches, you're going to build in problems. Repair, is now gaining a lot more visibility with the whole right to repair movement coming over originally from the US into Europe, with the NGOs are now being featured in the Circular Economy Action Plan. Now nearly 3,000 repair cafes in the world, the vast majority in Europe. So citizens now stepping up in the area. And I could bore you for another hour on repair cafes, but I won't. But we see there the amazing skills that sit in the community that on the social side that can really enable, despite products not being designed for repair. There's also significant potential for remanufacturing in targeted areas, and really, the area of remanufacturing is still fairly underdeveloped outside of certain countries and certain companies, but there's a lot more potential for remanufacturing. The other final area is systemic change, both at a sort of macro level, but also at a local level, in terms of new initiatives like industrial symbiosis initiatives. One organization, Waste is another company's input. So it's how you stimulate stuff at a local level, and linking to this idea of the shift towards block economies and localization resulting from COVID. Maybe this we'll see more opportunities in this sort of regional area that can be further developed, and maybe post-COVID new opportunities for skills development, for jobs, etc., etc. So I'll shut up now and I'll pass over to Ichin for the next stage.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for the introductions. My name is Ichin Chen. and greeting from Taiwan, and the co-author with Martin on this study, and I'm the director and the co-founder of the UK-based Sustainable Innovation Lab. One of my key activity around circular economy is I was set on the Euro Horizon 2020 advisory board member for the industry technology and the international cooperations. And I'm the key expert to integrate the circular economy put into research and the innovation agenda. And also other things involved on the UK 25 million fund new initiative for the next 5 years on sustainable manufacture and environmental pollutions. I'm a technical advisory board member for that initiative. I would like to discuss the second half of the presentation. Will focus on the CE International Initiative and the cooperation, including trade and the finance institution and within the G20 process. I think in order to facilitate the transition toward CE in a global level, we need to explore the CE policy implication and its potential synergy with other policy agenda. And very important is looking to the traditional economic recovery along with the fast changing world that are the increasing driven by digital technology and artificial intelligence. And so I developed this global transformation to CE from 3R to 12R a couple of years ago. But at present, most of the world still primarily focus on narrow downstream issues such as waste management and the material recycle. As Martin mentioned, there's a lot of the opportunities around manufacture and also eco-design and push through global supply chain, which is we want to bring into this G20 discussion. G20 countries account for not only 85% of the global economy output, but also 75% of international trade. So there's an increasing awareness of the opportunity and the challenge related to international trade and how to finance CE. For example, how to remove trade related to obstacles such as export restrictions and also secondary material, secondary goods, and also reuse products. Currently, WTO and the free trade agreement provide a very useful platform to further explore this issue within their current working group committee like trade and environment, and also technical barrier to the trade, and also including like agriculture and the committee on development. So if we look into the finance institution, also has a key role to play to facilitate this global shift. Currently, we see some of the initiatives around the financial institution, which including EC, European Commission, work with the EIB, European Investment Bank, undertook some of the joint initiatives called the Circular Economy Finance Support Platform. And then also we see some of the initiatives within the EIB and also Asia Development Bank, Africa Development Bank, all look into some of the CE activity. But in the global level, we see very limited financial institution really come out some of the big projects over this issue. So there's gap there to really push on through this knowledge of gap. We look into the global level, there's some of the, this is a snapshot on some of the major platforms in the international level are dealing with the sustainable resource and the management, which could be an instrument for the global CE cooperation, also provide the G20 some of the key players and the stakeholder to engage with. So we're looking to including UN based like PAGE or the PACE platform for accelerated the circular economy. We have a director, David here. He will put some of more thought into the discussion later on. But some of these initiatives, some of them not using circular economy, mainly use some of them use just resource efficiency, sustainable consumption, production related to overall we call resource efficiency. So we can look into this board initiative and the platform to look into how actually global players, including G20, can really drive this transition into the mega scale. So I won't go down the detail. A lot of public and private cooperation within the page. And if we look into within the G20 content, we have the G20 2020 last week in Saudi. And in the past couple of years, we see the G7 alliance on the resource efficiency and moving to the action plan. And also within the G20, we see German in 2017 and Japan in 2019 really try to come out of some of the agenda and the initiative to bring G20 resource efficiency from dialogue to roadmap. And now we hope the 2021, when Italian presidency set up the one of the 4 agenda, circular economy is supposed to be one of the key priority area. So we recommend within the G20 might be important to integrate and mainstreaming CE to the current working group. For example, resource efficiency working group, and also potential climate change sustainability working group. Through this existing environmental initiative within G20, you actually can really integrate together rather than have a separate agenda. Overall, we really come out our final conclusion, and the recommendation is very important in short term. The global has in the post-pandemic economic recovery is very, very important to look into integrate economical recovery and the social resilience in a climate constraint and also increasing digital world. So unless we addressing those issues in the big content, we really cannot bring the CE into the mainstream. The second important things we recommend should work with G20 should work with ISO and other international and national standard body in order to develop a universal agreed definition of CE and establish some of the key circularity indicators for product and process based on these definitions. And also that including monitoring framework to measure progress in the circularity transition. In addition to those definition target, you also need to some of the hard indicators about resource productivity, material footprint, waste generation, or recycle rate. Those progress should be measured, use indicator at the international level, which has the G20 has a very good opportunity to bring this into the top 20 most biggest economy in the world. And third is Martin mentioned earlier, we have to link more clearly establish a synergy between circular economy and also climate change, and look into the big picture. one of the key area we recommend is explore the decarbonizing global industry through CE by taking account both supply side and the demand side technology and the perspective. One of the key supply side technology, including energy efficiency, especially in the system level, like the industry symbiosis or industry zone, electrification, carbon capture, and the chemical feeding stock. That is part of what Martin mentioned earlier on. The Saudi is pushing on the carbon circular economy is chemical feeding stock and the carbon capture into the industry process. So crucial, that's the demand supply side of technology. We also need to look into some of the crucial demand side approach, which is including material efficiency design, which is eco design, reduction in material waste, and also you look into substitute low carbon material, including biomaterial from the high carbon material. And you also can look into some of the CE interventions, such as improving product longevity, reusability, easy of for the refurbishment and the recyclability. Those are key areas we look into both technology and the industry activity. So there's also very important in short term, G20 or global has to focus on prioritize key impact sectors because we especially need to focus on resource intensive and also high impact sector has to be also both work for developing country and advanced country. We know the G20 probably half is a developing country, half is a developed country. So we recommend one of the, like first one we already mentioned, climate change and the decarbonization should cover all of the G20 country. Other one is highly recommend is we look into agriculture, water and food, because that's including water and the food circular system, including biomass from the food waste and the food, water, energy nexus. For example, the technology uses microalgae to synchronize the industry CO2 and transfer that waste into the food, water, energy. So those kind of the new technology and new system approach is we highly suggest both developing country and the developed country should focus on. Other impact area including construction and the buildings that is related to the developing world urbanization in the next couple of decades. So that's important we integrate that into the circular economy activities. And other one is including fashion, textile, and the ICT and the e-waste. So I won't go down the details on those industries, but every country has to define their own opportunity and challenge. But this will be very, very big challenge, impact sector in the global scale. And in the long, mid-term and also longer term, I think it's very important that G20 also should promote CE pilot project and CE technology and product service accelerating network. Through such coordinate commitment within the G20 could give the signal to the global business and the investment community to actually bring in the technology and the innovation from the demo project to actually can actually scale up to the cities level, regional level, and national level. Through this course-cutting, country and the course innovation cooperation is the only way I can see after those global meltdown through the COVID-19, we can use this activity to actually bring back global through either block economies, through CE activity. Actually, we get innovation and technology deployment, and to tackle with both issue on the environmental and recovery plan. Next one. So in second most important things in longer terms, G20 should evaluate how existing economic instruments could incentivize the mainstream CE at global level. Some of the policy or economic instruments using the national level, including carbon tax on the virgin material, or with the proposal we call landfill tax, or tax on pollution in general, which will give a signal to in the international level, just choose a product and the process and technology has the less environmental impact. So other public economic instruments, also including like public support to create the industry symbiosis process. Also, you can go through the public procurement to give the solid market pool incentive for those initiate circular economy product and service. Next one. Very important, we also look into developing countries. Currently, many of the activities are mainly driven, circular economy activity was driven by advanced economies. But in the long run, developing countries are becoming increasing important center for the production of the goods, that including all of the manufacture hub in Asia. Also, in the future, there will be the future center of the consumption in the next 1 or 2 decades. So that's important is knowledge exchange and the transformation on the CE activity need to be really fully integrated into this G20 activity and also international activities. Some of the EU EC's activity outreach stakeholder engagement start to look into engage with Asia or Africa, South America. Those are increasing those international cooperation, but in the global scale, we do need two-way exchange. Some of the actually outstanding performance CE activity might be from the East or South. That will be integrated into, could be also feedback and integrated into advanced economy as well, as advanced economy go to the West and South. So our final conclusion and recommendation is we have to achieve the long-term sustainable development goal through CE actions. Currently, a research found there's probably 10 out of 70 SDG goal could potential contribute to the CE, that including SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and then including sustainable city and community, sustainable consumption and production, climate change, life below water, and life on land. But in all of those activities, the most important things is, I think, through circular economy can solve the global waste crisis, which currently affect the population of low income and the middle income countries. Up to 2 billion people still don't have access to proper solid waste collection and proper waste management. So looking the whole CE approach, which will be also resolve some of the key challenge we're facing on the planet at the moment. So that's our recommendation for our research. Thank you. But I will finally also want to thank again Italian government and also some of our review paper expert, including Waters here and the other expert, to help provide valuable insight and comment to our paper. Thank you. I will pass to Martin.
Maybe if you just mute it for a moment. So thank you very much, Ichin. What we're going to now do is move into a panel, and the way that is going to hopefully work is that each panelist will do a short 1 minute-ish introduction to who they are and their interest in circular economy. And then I'll go back to each expert and ask for their views on, how to overcome some of the obstacles, some of the future issues that we may see emerging over the next sort of 3, 5, 10 years, and how to progress some of the recommendations. And then hopefully we'll have a short discussion, and then we'll pick up some questions from the chat box, and then Ichin will join us for that stage. So for anyone who's picks up on various points, please add them to the chat box and we'll tackle them at the end. So again, I'll introduce the panelists again. And we have Walter Starr-Hill, one of the gurus in the area from the Product Life Institute, involved since the 1970s. We have Daniel from IAI. We've got David from PACE and Christian from Duchy of Luxembourg. So if I can just ask Walter to start off with a short introduction, and then we can then pass over to Daniel. So over to you, Walter.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for the invitation. Well, for the last 45 years, I've focused my research and lectures on waste prevention, circular economy, and loss prevention, risk management. In both cases, we are dealing with the issue of maintaining existing values. So not value added, but maintaining existing values. Next.
So, okay, so pass over to Daniel now. Thank you,
Hello,
Walter.
everyone. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm Daniel. I work for the Istituto Affari Internazionali, IAI. That is very hard to pronounce, I admit. I've been working on circular economy from a food perspective, focusing on food waste management and how cities can be crucial actors in fostering a circular economy transformation and shift. So thanks again for the invitation, and I look forward for your questions and comments.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. David?
Sure, I'm David McGinty. I'm the Global Director for PACE, the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy, which is a coalition of CEOs and ministers who are championing this work globally. So I would say I'm not an expert on the technical side like Walter, of course, but I'm an expert in engaging the stakeholders to take up these actions. So it's a pleasure to be with you and to see some familiar faces and names in the group.
Great, thank you, David. And last but no means least, Christian.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Christian Tock. I'm the Director for Sustainable Technologies at the Ministry of the Economy in Luxembourg. We really see the circular economy as an economic opportunity, and we've been working for about, let's say, 6 or 7 years now on building the ecosystem that this new business model needs to be able to develop at the required pace.
Great, thank you very much. So if I can then take it back to Walter, is, you know, from your 45, 50 years experience in looking at the area, what are the key obstacles to a transition to a circular economy, and what do you think we need to do? What do you also think are going to be the emerging issues, particularly thinking about the new world, you know, at present and likely after, you know, we come out of CV19? And then, you know, some thoughts about the recommendations that were made, or other personal recommendations from your experience that you think the G20 should be progressing.
Well, I would say the most important thing to remember is that circular economy is about economics. It's about competitiveness and innovation. So on one hand, we have to clean up the legacy of the Anthropocene, in other words, the plastics in the ocean and all the other man-made materials for which we never accepted a man-made liability. We now have to accept this, and there are different ways to do it, such as a full producer responsibility. In other words, anything that you cannot reuse or recover or repair, return it to the manufacturer, because he has the knowledge and made the profit of the product. But in order to cut short this legacy waste, we also have to push circular sciences and circular chemistry. That was already mentioned by you, Martin. The one avenue is the carbon capture and utilization, which is pushed by a number of universities and countries. But it's also plastics, circular plastics, PDKs. There's a number of circular plastics that can really then be polymerized and repolymerized, so it can really go in circles, but it's plastics that are monomers that are really different from the present ones. Then circular ceramics, which is pushed very strongly by the cement makers, cement manufacturers, and some other areas. Circular energy. Hydrogen, in my opinion, is the obvious solution, because if we have water and we have solar energy or hydroelectricity, then we can easily produce hydrogen. A number of countries, including Japan, was first, again, 20 years ago. But Norway is going that way now. The Swedish steel industry is going that way. In Switzerland, we now have trucks, Hyundai trucks, for the big transport companies that are running on hydrogen and fuel cells. Then you have the German railway, which has decided now to switch from diesel to hydrogen fuel cells. Of course, cars have Honda, Toyota, several of the Japanese manufacturers have been selling, in the meantime, also in Switzerland, hydrogen fuel cell cars. And the Shell on an international level, but also the Swiss electricity companies have now started to develop producing and selling hydrogen, because as you probably know, in summer in Europe, the electricity price is negative. So if you are an electricity company, it's not a very good business. But if you transform this surplus electricity into hydrogen, then you are in a good business. So everything on the continent has started to move direction of hydrogen fuel cells, with the exception of the German car companies. Of course, they still believe in batteries because they want to beat Tesla. And then finally, metallurgy, that's the toughest circular science, but there are several new developments, for example, of getting pollution copper out of aluminum or eisen out of aluminum. So we have to, in order to really go into circular metallurgy, we have to have clean atoms, clean metals. And finally, most of these circular science initiatives are breaking out of the academic silos. It's biochemistry, bioengineering. It's using enzymes to depolymerize plastics. It's using dirty mixed plastic waste to produce hydrogen with enzymes. So we are opening completely new avenues, and this is why whoever is in this research and innovation process will have a big chance to become one of the leaders. I'm talking about industries, one of the leaders of the future circular industrial economy. Daniele, over to you.
Thanks, Walter. I think we're living in unprecedented times, not only because we are all reading and tasting and feeling that, but because for the implementation of the Agenda 2030 and all the goals set in terms of sustainability, either we fall and we make this decade lost decade, or we rise and we start up a true revolution. So I think circular economy is calling for this revolution, and I'm grateful because in the paper there are a lot of interesting points that I'd like to mention, and these points are of utmost importance. I think it is crucial to have a strategy. A recent paper by the Enel Foundation showed that in Europe, most of the countries still lack a roadmap or a strategy for achieving a circular economy and for streamlining EU legislation dealing with circular economy at the national level. Metrics, definitions are extremely important, and because if you cannot measure the phenomenon and the problem, you cannot tailor and envisage effective policies to tackle that. And of course, value chains are different from one another, but having a common metrics and definition is a crucial step to develop at a second stage value chain tailored approach. And in this sense, I also agree with the authors of the paper that common standards, certifications, and labels are extremely crucial in this regard. A recent report by the University of Amsterdam show that voluntary sustainability standards, as reported by the International Trade Center, are so many at the global level. There are more than 270 voluntary sustainability standards across 600 products. So there is a mess in terms also of business opportunities that creates uncertainty in this regard. So I think that should be homogenized and harmonized, and what you mentioned in the paper, I think, is extremely crucial in terms of common certifications and standardizations. Then in terms of governance, which is the topic I addressed the most, I think circular economy calls for a very big change. because it touches upon several levels of governance. You have the supranational governance, if we look at you have the intergovernmental governance, if we look at different multilateral fora like the G20, it calls for national governance, and then it calls for local governance, which is a topic that I'm very, close to where I work a lot. And a recent report by the Sustainability Development Network showed that 2/3 of the SDGs will be implemented at the local level. And the different levels of governance show that sometimes, and also actually many times, there could be negative spillover effects, even in circular economy policies. So policy that could be very positive and successful, at least, in terms of visions and goals at the national level, can produce negative spillovers at the local level. One clear example is, for instance, the food waste management. We all know that food waste, at least in the northern, in the global north, it's a problem that needs to be addressed at consumer level. But even in countries like Italy, where we have very strong and innovative food waste legislation, shifting from the national to the local level has created big problems in terms of implementation, in terms of fiscal incentives, in terms of revenues, and so forth. So addressing the complexity of the levels of governance is absolutely crucial. Then, of course, there is the issue of subsidies. In Italy, there are around 19 billion euros of subsidies that are addressing fossil fuels that could be redirected to different value chains and to foster, a real green transition. And this would be extremely in line with the ambitious goals set at EU level in terms of the European Green Deal, Farm to Fork strategy, and so on. So I think this needs to be addressed because despite of the fact that several states at the global level have launched an unprecedented package of resources allocated to protect the economy from the COVID-19 effects, it is hard to see how circular economy and sustainability principles have been streamlined as a policy guidance framework. And I think this is extremely important, because otherwise, as the very nice picture you show in the presentation, we are losing, the overall problem. So we're concentrating on very niche and temporary solutions, but we completely lose the entire picture. And finally, I think it is crucial to address the issue of knowledge and capacity building and training. And this is related to the issue of multi-level governance that was touching before. Cities are crucial actors in implementing circular economy strategy, policies, projects, initiatives, and so forth. But it is very, very hard to see at the city public officials level decent level of knowledge of what this sustainability agenda really implies. So if we don't start up and accompany public officials at the regional and city level to streamline SDGs and to draft policies and projects that really take into account the circular economy principles, we will rarely see big changes on the ground. And it will be also hard for us and for the whole political sphere and community to communicate consumers about the importance of change and to bring them to the table to actually start up this radical change that we all need to achieve the goals set in terms of circular economy.
Thank you very much. And David, if you have any comments?
Yeah, sure. I think, so much has been said already, but that's really great, both information as well as recommendations. Maybe I'll just make some comments in the framework of the recommendations you have in the paper. So one around defining, standardizing, and measuring circularity. There's a lot of movement. We have within PACE, we're facilitating a coalition as much as possible with the resources available around governments and companies and intermediaries that are working on metrics. So that's, if you think on the corporate side, you've got the metrics from WBCSD, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, you mentioned ISO earlier, and there are a few others floating around. And I would reference to a piece that we put out with Circle Economy, I believe last month or in September, that provides an overview of metrics from businesses on circular economy. Kind of looks at it. It's a pretty objective piece. Those different groups working on it reviewed the piece and agreed with the characterization, right? And it shows just some comparison and contrasting. On the government side, we're working on a paper now that we'll release sometime early next year that's doing the same type of global scan on public sector metrics, mostly focusing on national level, kind of MESO level metrics. And that really runs the gamut of everything you've all been talking about, from people looking at metrics around social impacts to material flows, to other issues like linking to climate action. And then the what I would say an underlying theme here, and I believe Christian Hudson was in the call, at least, yeah, he's still there. Data and systems to drive the actual metrics is the elephant in the room when it comes to indicators, because even the most advanced countries, whether that's Germany, who's got a working paper on, hundreds of metrics that they want to look at, as well as the Dutch government, Peru, which is actually a little bit of a leader in Latin America on metrics. They're at least starting to really look at this. Ultimately, whatever they set up, their bureaus of statistics and others don't necessarily have the data they need to drive it and actually report back. And I think we just see that it's, I wouldn't say exacerbating, but it very much mirrors the issues with measurement under SDG 12, where we still don't have agreement globally on what sustainable means. So that's the other elephant in the room going on. So with that, on the third recommendation on finding synergies with decarbonization of industry, I'm 100% on board. And we've got if you took the leading governments working on circular economy and then created some subgroups about what they actually think the value of circular economy is, there's momentum now in decarbonization. And what that would mean is reprioritizing some of the areas of focus. And I find it interesting to think about that prioritization with the recommendations that you had on impact sectors, because what wasn't in your list were plastics as an example, but you have the built environment. But what's not in your list is transportation. But transportation is a very clear area where in decarbonization, energy transition, and dematerialization, there could be some potential big impacts, especially in high growth urban-based economies, to look at mobility. But what I would say there's a few points. One is that there's a need, I think, to find the way when you link to decarbonization, what creates the sense of urgency for you to also look at dematerialization, in addition to the energy transition and existing tactics and strategies. So that's kind of a regular feedback. There's enough of an established industry and system and set of priorities in decarbonization. When you bring circular economy to it, you can't just come with the broad narrative that this includes all those actions plus some other things. You have to really emphasize the additionality of circularity. And I think the urgency comes from us finding clear recommendations to make that need to be incorporated to meet the goals for 2030, and not letting dematerialization be pushed off to the 2050 agenda, which seems to be a little bit of the tendency that we experience. And so there's a little bit, and the other kind of push on this issue is a little bit similar to what happened around creating the economic case for climate action in general. I think we do have some work to go as a community to establish a clear economic case for to link a circular action to show how it would actually contribute to more resilient or growing healthy economies. And I think the business case is there for industries. The competitiveness case might be there for a specific country, but the economic theory globally is not quite as clear as our partners desire. And maybe just a few stories to watch, just to, because noting the time. One is, I think what's going to be interesting is to see in this coming year how many countries reference circular economy policies in their NDC submissions. So we already know that from a recent survey done by UNDP, or UNEP, sorry, and UNFCCC, that 9 countries in Latin America will be referencing circular economy specifically in their NDC. That's just a good leading indicator or lagging indicator of what countries are thinking about. The second is whether China, Japan, and Korea will explicitly link their circular economy priorities to their commitments that they're now making at the political level to be net zero. So that's where you start to see the material, the reality hitting the road, where those things are going to link. The third is from UNEA 5, so the UN Environment Program's assembly that's coming up. What's going to happen with the global treaty that's been recommended on plastics? And if you take circular economy and think of the kind of political engagement and movement, if plastics is the place with least resistance, which I would propose it is right now, you know, seeing what happens with that treaty can give us a little bit of a roadmap of what we might want to do on other materials.
We have it for the unit meeting next week, but
yeah, exactly. And
all good.
Yep, just kind of 2 more quick things.
Okay.
One is in the race to zero on the corporate side leading up to the COP, how many companies who are making those commitments are explicitly stating circular economy approaches as a tool for them to reach their commitments? And a kind of general statement that I will make a lot of times is that no company, manufacturing company especially, will be able to be net zero or address scope 3 emissions if they don't have circularity as a key strategy. So therefore, are they actually being explicit and transparent about those approaches? And then finally, we'll be releasing through PACE an action agenda, which gives within different focal areas, materials and industries, kind of agreed upon action. So agreed on by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, UNEP, and others on for any leader who wants to take up circular economy priorities. This is the guidebook to make it easy. And the question is, will they actually pick up those priority areas or pick up other areas that aren't necessarily agreed upon by the Church of Circular Economy, as I would refer to this group. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, great. Christian, you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. So I would like to say that I think that the paper is actually very well written, and it touches upon most of the issues that we're gonna see, and most of the actions that we should actually start looking at if we want to implement the circular economy. I agree with everything that has been said before. I want to touch on a particular point which I think is also key, and that's the coordination and timing. As our ministry is working really on, like I said, building this ecosystem, we have a lot of actors that we work with, and we've seen companies that have done a lot of things right, and they have a circular product, but the market wasn't ready for it, or the suppliers weren't. The regulation is not there yet, and so on. So I think really coordinating these different activities and getting the timing right is absolutely key, because it could create a lot of frustration if people are either on the market side tendering for circular solutions and they can't find them. They may not try again over a certain period of time. Or on the other side, if on the offer side, you have an offer of a circular solution or product, and then no one's buying it because people are not ready yet. And the G20 on a much higher level, of course, is all about coordination and timing. And I think that is key. And Luxembourg will publish the national circular economy strategy, or the new one, probably by the end of this year, latest beginning of next year. And it's all about that. It's all about giving ourselves a national coordination unit, giving ourselves methodologies to basically just take all the activities that are ongoing and that will come and coordinate them, give them a common vision, and make sure that they all are streamlined, because there's a lot of things happening, not only in Luxembourg. And I think the key is to bring this together and make sure that it becomes a whole. And that's also where I see one of the major future issues, and that is the scale up. There's a lot of activities going on. There's a lot of things that start really working on the local level maybe. And at some point we need to really make this international, and we need to have the right system for that. So we need the standards for that. We need the single market rules. We need internationalization. And if you look at the linear economy, which basically has developed all those tools, agreements among countries over the last 100 to 200 years, and we're still doing it. It is really going to be very complex to achieve that in just maybe a decade, because that's what we need. We can't wait for 100 years to have all the standards in place, so that the circular economy can really work cross-border, and that all the good solutions that we identify are actually working on a larger level than just the regional or national levels. That, of course, for Luxembourg being specifically important, because we are a small country and we are never going to be circular if it's not in collaboration with the countries surrounding us and even the European Union level or worldwide level. When it comes to the recommendations that the paper is showing, I just want to pick out two, and that is the capacity building and the pilot projects and innovation, because I really think that there we are still in a phase where we are exploring things. And so we still need to test, to learn from what we're trying out, and then generalize the conclusions we get from there. Put those in the legislation, all the things we learned from really doing it on a day-to-day business, and that is why also we need to involve everybody. I think the top-down approach, the bottom-up approach, they need to meet somewhere. They need to be coherent. All this know-how being created needs to be picked up. Needs to be shared on a national but also an international level, and we have to find out what works best and make sure that it is implemented quickly. And by doing that, we also need to make sure that people are aware of what the circular economy is and what the benefits are, that it is contributing to the SDGs, for instance, and that's why we're doing all this. Even though I completely agree with what has been said before, we, being the Ministry of the Economy, really think about this as an economic development, and you have to get the economics right. But the benefits, even going beyond the pure economics, need to be known and need to be shown, because in the end, it's also the final customer that has to accept this. And I still think that there's a lot of work to do there. So we need to also engage a lot with the municipalities, and with really let's say the more social companies that are on the ground and that talk to the citizens every day, so that that all that is known and all that can be implemented in a large scale. So that's basically just from my side the contribution. I really think that coordination and timing is key, and making sure that the environment for all these good ideas is right, so that they can grow very, very fast.
Great, thank you very much all for the thoughts and contribution. What I'm going to try and do is just bring out a few key points from all the rich information, and then if anybody wants to sort of pick up anything from that list, if you like, please feel free to just jump in. So I heard some stuff here around, you know, let's say just as a given that, you know, circular economy needs to fit within overall approaches to sustainable development, SDGs, but it's how do we link the agenda to the circular economy agenda, to decarbonisation, even to new forms of energy like hydrogen. And again, sorry, what would be great if you could make any comments or further recommendations or refinement in terms of what the G20 should be doing. So we've also got something around this issue of how you integrate circular economy into national strategies, the coordination, the planning, and then the sort of communication of that. Issues around governance in, you know, G20 countries and between G20 countries and amongst G20, you know, at both a national level, a regional level, and also a local level, and at a sort of city level. When I guess a lot of G20 activity is interested at that sort of national level, a lot of the potential for circularity is that regional or local level or at that city level. So How do we tackle this? Maybe it's new forms of local networks or city networks, or integrating circularity into C20 type of networks. We've got issues around knowledge and capacity building pilot projects, and also Walter's, broader but sort of specific concept of circular science around material science, etc., and how we almost shift the thinking amongst different sciences and get sciences operating more in a multidisciplinary manner. We've also got issues there emerging around full producer responsibility, not limited producer responsibility, and across multiple sectors. This can be done at G20 level. A key issue that was mentioned again that reminded me of my experience in sitting in an advisory board for the southeast of England is the issue of could somebody mute themselves? I'm not sure who that is. I think it's a Dutch person. Could you mute yourself? Anyway, there's the issue of data, how you get good data, granular data across circularity, repair, remanufacturing. Very difficult. We found at the regional level. So there's. I'm not sure if there's a smart way I can or anybody can identify who is mute, who's not muted.
Sebastian, can you please mute yourself, please? You just can't.
Or I think I've just muted Sebastian, or not muted. So the issue of data. How can you measure unless you have the data, information, and even knowledge? So how do we better identify and collect better data sets across the key issues of circularity? How we bring in the national statistical agencies into this discussion, and how we build that up from the granular to the higher level. Big issue. So measurement and metrics without data is rather difficult. And I would say also another couple of issues here. There is the general issue of standards, but also the issue of developing business cases at different levels, and not just business cases at the level of business, but also government and other key stakeholders. How do we make, how do we join things up and make the case for investment in circularity? And I'd also say at a micro level, a key point that Christian brought out here was scale up. Many startups involving now new businesses who've got a circular model. One of the reasons why that's emerging is because they don't have to deal with the embedded systems of large complex organizations, and also the new blood is moving in this direction where sustainability and circularity within that is built into a lot of young people's DNA. So many multiple flowers and daisies out there growing. But how do they grow? Well, it's not a very good metaphor, sorry, from a daisy into a tree. So, but I think you know what I mean. So this, absolutely how we mainstream and develop the incentives and markets. So sorry for my ramble in the key points there, but you provided such good information. So if anybody has any comments on any elements of that, please shout. And Ichin, you can make a comment as well.
Okay, since I'm not being talked yet, so I just a quick response. Probably not directly into a lot already being summarized very well by Martin. I want to actually pull up some of the more bolder issues, especially when we are doing the research around this agenda in this year over the COVID-19 period. there's a huge discussion about geopolitical change. I think in the beginning, when Italian IAI tried to discussing this issue, one of the key challenge is actually over the decades, globalization. There's huge backlash in the community and the society about so-called global governance, including against to the G20s. And that is played by some right-wing politicians. At the same time, you have Trump pull out from all of the multinational governance, including G20 discussion for a long time. And we have the CE agenda here. And when we try to pull this paper together, I found it a very challenge because we don't know what's the president election outcome of the US. And also we don't know which way the globalization will go. Will go to back to the national strategy or block economy, or we continue have this bolder idea globalization of CE at all. That's our challenge when we try to think through those things. Including does the World Trade Organization, WTO World Trade Organization is plus or minus for the circular economy? Or the more question is, could we or should we look into regional approach rather than global CE? For example, if potential, a lot of the material will be shifted or sent to certain countries, does the circular economy activity like repair, refurbishment, and also remanufacture will actually bring more job and also more local economy thriving through block and also more regional. I mean here is more block economy. So we look into the block. We might be more sense look into Northern America as a block, Southern America is a block, Europe is a block, and then you see Asia, maybe China itself is a block, and then you got East, South Asia could be block. Will we actually, through circular economy, we will push back to this the regional block economy? So that's my thinking process.
So maybe one last, maybe you can mute Kitchen. So the echo. So just one, maybe just quickly go across the group for one final comment. Is really focusing on that regional dimension, thinking about G20, but also focusing on this regional local dimension. So one of the key other elements prior to the pandemic that I'm sure we were all talking about in our presentations, prior to that, pandemic was 3 mega trends summarized in many reports and other, technological acceleration, environmental declaration, challenges, and globalization. So, but clearly, the pandemic has really, added a lot of questions around that whole globalization agenda. So, what are each of your thoughts in relation to the impact, the current impact, and short-term future impact around globalization and the regional dimension? So maybe. Is Walter still on the call, or if not, maybe?
No, I'm here. Sorry, Martin.
Yeah.
Well, I'm convinced that of a intelligent decentralization, and I'm collecting examples. The latest are medicine.
Maybe your microphone, Walter, I think is up by your ear.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, so I'm convinced that the solution is, or one of the solutions is decentralized, intelligent decentralization. And I've got, in the meantime, dozens of examples, including robots, of course, that you no longer need to have global factories because you can have robots everywhere where there is a demand. But some of the latest are in pharmaceuticals and medicals. I don't know if you have seen, there is now technology to print these RNA, mRNA medicines on a on a tiny printer. And guess who is financing this whole thing? It's our friend Elon Musk again. So there are some real, on the decentralized local level, I think there will be revolutions hitting us to our benefit, because then we don't need transport, we don't need a lot of the logistics, we don't need packaging. Just think in your own environment of microbreweries and micro bakeries that have become, especially in Europe, very standard, or repair cafes, of course, is also an intelligent decentralization of knowledge and applying knowledge. So I'm following that area with a lot of interest, because it's almost daily there are new examples coming up. Thank you, Mark.
No, and just building on that, I mean, from my direct experience of the repair cafe that I chair, we've been using 3D printing for repair. So printing new components. So there is, apart from the examples that Walter gave, there is an opportunity for 3D printing to, support the repair process. Christian, do you have any comments?
Yes, so I agree with what Walter said. I mean, the technology will allow us to be much more local and regional, and there's a lot yet to come there. Again, being from Luxembourg, for us, it's always been cross-border. We can't have a functioning economy just by looking at the national borders. I would just like to maybe make a difference between local, regional, and let's say national. So like I said, if it could be cross-border and still be regional and local. That's what we do a lot. We work with the neighboring regions of the country, so it's local, but it doesn't have to stay inside the borders, because there is a slight risk there that we're going to fall into protectionism of a kind, and that is, I don't think that is good. One of the advantages of globalization is that it's interconnected, that it helps also cultural exchange to some extent, and so falling back in the national borders, that would be, I think, the wrong signal. But definitely, I mean, regions can stretch across borders without any problem. So that's something I think the EU should work on and facilitate this, so that regional doesn't mean national.
Great. And David?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a rich discussion for both professional and talk at the pub. So maybe a little bit of a different tone in those conversations. But there's a lot of discussion around material flows and value chain alignment, economic blocks, trading blocks. But I would say just on its face, there's definitely a need to regionalize and localize strategies and priorities. And I'll just use the recommendation around linking circular economy to climate action as a clear example where, if you've got developing countries, they're just not, the heavy emitters. And so making that link to climate action is not going to get this as a priority issue for them. That's there's low friction there to get them to take that approach. There's also low impact. It's really more about decent work, economic growth, and how circular economy is going to enable them to do that over a period of time to get what is viewed as an appropriate human development scale. So I think in that sense, regionalization and localization is absolutely necessary. And Latin America's got a very different geopolitical and economic situation versus South Asia or Southeast Asia, et cetera. And I just maybe one thing to really that I've enjoyed about the last year and a half that I've been in this job is not just seeing where the different countries are, but why they're where they are. And then thinking about how you take that movement forward. So if you take Southeast Asia, there's a lot of momentum around ocean waste and plastics. The question is, how do you then translate that into textiles, translate it into electronics and other areas? And the other area that for me is interesting is seeing emerging within Europe and developed markets where you're starting to see the domestic strategies translate into international cooperation, and how circular economy is really going to embed into the diplomatic agenda, the trade agenda, and the development assistance agenda. So when we're starting to engage, one of the things we've really been working on in the last year and a half is moving beyond the ministers of environment. So working with ministers of environment is key on the domestic agenda and as technical advisors on the international agenda, but working with ministers of foreign affairs, talking to economy and trade, et cetera, to see how these national level circular economy strategies really become national level strategies, both internally and externally. And we've got people from the commission here who are working on those issues, and you can see that pretty clearly, how that's starting to really fit into the circular economy action plan and other areas.
Great, and Daniel?
Yes, there is not that much to add to what my colleague said. I think the regionalization is a very important issue that needs to be studied and elaborated more. As Christian said, we have to be careful about not transforming that into new forms of protectionism, but trying to understand how, for instance, reducing value chains would also increase the transparency of these value chains and consumers' powers to ask and to demand for more circular and sustainable products, value chains, and so forth. So I think that G20 is the place where states need to have the ambition to launch innovative and also ambitious targets to try to implement new approaches to trade, to finance, to economic development. What David said is crucial. Circular economy calls for horizontal approach, which destroys the silos, which destroys the singular perceptions of the phenomenon. It calls for cooperation of different ministries, of different actors. So that is why multi-stakeholders approach and partnerships are extremely valuable for unveiling these problems and the dangers and the cost of a siloed approach towards this phenomena.
Great. And Ichin, did you have any final thought? Yeah. So yes, I mean, just to, I think to close off, because we're running a little bit late, is certainly this, what I, from my perspective, what one's seen really evolve over the last few years is, particularly within the European Commission's perspective, is maybe some of these initiatives were started, in DGM or whatever environment before, but now you're seeing DG Grow, DG Consumer, even from work we've been doing between, the Commission and China, in the electronic sector, DG Connect, and I didn't even know DG Connect even existed. So you're getting multiple series of DGs and departments and functions now engaging with this agenda. And it's sort of interesting that the funders of the paper we did was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and not the Ministry of Environment. So that's sort of an interesting issue in terms of how the discussion, I think, is evolving. So I'd like to thank everybody, particularly the experts, for your time and energy in the discussion. And I hope, I always say this, I hope people, the attendees got at least one thing, one thought, one thing they disagreed with, one new idea from the presentation. So thank you all very much, and hope you enjoyed the session, and goodbye, good evening. Thank you very much.